And when you have that, access to that power and money and time, you can commit, horrible acts of evil. And most people on planet Earth are the little guy. And most people, us little guys, for the most part, we tend to be good-natured people. We have, a sense of right and wrong. We want to be kind to our neighbor, and we want to live, peacefully, get along. But when you are part of that small, super powerful elite, you no longer think in those terms. And a big reason why people are so averse to the idea of conspiracies, we'll get into that word later, but the fact that people are actually capable of getting together and committing coordinated acts of evil is a hard concept to swallow. So we're going to sort of talk about that a little bit first, and a little bit about some examples of what's called false flag terrorism, where a country commits a terrorist act upon it itself, or upon, under a different guise, and being able to blame a different culprit wrongfully. So in going with the fact that there is a super powerful elite out there and they do have an agenda, I want to play track one, which is George H.W. Bush, the first George Bush Sr., and a very famous speech that he gave in 91.
Okay, here we go.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So there it is. I think we were talking about that this weekend. That's the famous George H.W. Bush New World Order speech.
All right, and that was done, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that was done on September 11th?
Yes, that speech was given, again, we're talking about the elite. We're talking about people that are ritual bound and people that are obsessed with numbers and numerology. But here you are with, an open account of an elite, one of the super elites, someone highly connected to the CIA, making an open statement about his new, not his, but their New World Order agenda and how it's going to be achieved, being given on September 11th, 1991, exactly 10 years prior to 9/11. And, of course, who was in the White House on 9/11, 2001? But his son.
Yeah, that's goosebumps right there, listening to that. And he also, it's really creepy how he says how there'll be a new world order, and there will be.
Yeah.
Like, there's no doubt.
Yes, you can see his reptilian eyes flash at that moment, I'm sure. But fortunately, here's an example of one of the good guys. They're not all bad. Thank God we have currently people like Ron Paul. But here's a very famous speech from Dwight Eisenhower, 1961 speech, where he actually rails against the military-industrial complex and the New World Order. So you can hit track 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
All right, you're tuned into Mass Transition, a pre-recorded Mass Transition. It was our special 9/11 show.